Hi, everybody. Welcome along to Percussion Discussion, episode 31. Hope you're all well out there, and I hope you are enjoying all the interviews we're doing for you. Please check out our social media. You'll find we've got accounts with Instagram, with Facebook. You can find us on Twitter, and of course, our YouTube channel, if you'd be kind enough to subscribe to that. This will ensure you don't miss any of our upcoming interviews, and we've got some great ones coming up. And of course, it will mean you get to see all the ones we've done previously. Now, a little about today's guest. He's one of those drummers that I'd heard his name, didn't know a great deal about him. But when I was offered the opportunity of having a chat with him, I jumped at the chance. I've read his CV and it's nothing short of remarkable. A guy who's played on some of the biggest hits you can imagine, including 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton and Endless Love, Lionel Richie, and so many more. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Rick Shlosser.
No problem whatsoever. I'm so glad that Steve Barney recommended that I get in touch or put us together. So.
Absolutely, yes. Steve Barney is a good friend of ours, and he kindly fixed this up. So thank you, Steve. I'm sure you'll be watching it at some point or other. He's a great guy. So yeah, it's great to have you here. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you, and I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say, when he mentioned your name, I went, "Oh, I don't know that name," and I instantly looked at all the things you've done, and I literally hang my head in shame. And I don't know.
Please.
You have an incredible back catalogue of work, don't you? You really do.
I was really fortunate, back when it was so much easier. Drum Lin, the Lin machine and everything else. When they hired real drummers to, play real music.
But you've still got to do it though, haven't you? That's the thing. You can't,
Yeah. No, there's no stopping.
No, absolutely not. But look, let's go back to kind of almost to the beginning of your drumming life, if you like.
Sure.
Where did it all begin for you? Who were your influences, etc.?
Well, around age 10, I was playing trumpet, and then I decided, I just start playing some drums too. And I had it was just something, I started tap dancing when I was 4.
Yeah.
And something about rhythm, and it sort of captured my imagination. So it just seemed logical to move on. And when I got really interested in drums, I got a single snare drum and started playing on it, started taking lessons. And then in 6th grade, on the way to school in Springfield, Massachusetts, during the winter, sliding on some ice, a friend of mine stuck his foot out and I fell forward with my hands like this, and my hands spread apart and I smashed my 2 front teeth.
Yeah.
The end of my trumpet career. But I kept playing drums.
Yeah.
And so I just listened to everything back then. I mean, I wasn't listening to jazz so much, and R&B wasn't really happening so much. But I loved, and I don't know, anything that had a rhythm that moved me. I just loved listening to. And I ended up, in junior high, I joined the band and met a guitar player. We started playing some college fraternity parties when I was about 15 and playing any song that he knew. But it was when I got to high school that I really started just taking it more seriously. And there was another drummer in high school with me, a guy named Bill McCullough, who I remember going over his house, and the first time I saw what he could do, I was just like, what are you doing? I mean, he had this amazing techniques. His technique was amazing, and all this cross stuff. And I just, he helped me a lot, learning some stuff. And I just kept moving along. And out of high school, my dad wanted to be a doctor. So I went into chemistry and biology for 2 years, and then ended up wandering into Berklee School of Music in Boston. And I just went, you know what? This is really where I need to be. But unfortunately, it was Vietnam. So the draft board said, well, you can't go to a 4-year college for 2 years and then switch to another 4-year college. So they made me take Berkeley. They said, we'll give you 1 extra year. Now you have to finish Berkeley in 3 years. Well, it turned out during that time that I was playing, in blues bands and R&B bands and Combat Zone, and I actually ended up getting out of the draft, so I never even finished Berkeley, and I went on the road. But it was sort of a long process, and the people that really, back in high school, I remember Joe Morello grew up in Holyoke,
Right.
which was right next to Springfield, and my teacher in high school was Joe Sefcik, who taught Joe Morello early on. And so Joe was a big, big influence.
Yeah.
And then listening to just my influences then started getting more, not only just Joe and learning that kind of stuff, but more dance music. I had a band in high school with a 10-piece band with 5 black singers and 5 white musicians. And we played all the current R&B stuff that was happening. And so that was, I guess, in terms of who really influenced me back then, I guess Morello really did. And that was about it at that point,
That's quite an influence to have, isn't it? Let's be honest about it.
Well, I was taking I remember once I was taking a lesson, and all of a sudden my teacher, Joe, looked up at the doorway and he goes, "Hey, Joe, how are you?" And there's Joe Morello standing there. And I was like totally speechless, right? And Joe Sefcik says, "Hello, Joe, I want you to meet one of my students, Rick." And I remember shaking Joe Morello's hand, and I didn't even look at his face. I looked at his hand thinking, maybe he has 6 fingers. I don't know. How can he do this stuff? So that was, I'll just never forget that. That was great.
I'm just going to jump back a little bit. You mentioned the dancing thing. It seems to be a common thing for drummers, of a certain era, let's say. For example, Buddy Rich, Steve Gadd, both tap dancing at a young age. The thing is, it is a thing. It's related.
Actually, Steve and I talked about that one time, and many, many years ago. I was in New York City doing some recording, but yeah, you're right. A lot of drummers just started tap dancing, and then that rhythm thing just moved along into using your hands and your feet. And I mean, I've heard tap dancers that could do stuff with their feet that I could barely do with my entire kit. I mean, rhythmically, it's an amazing way to to play rhythm. Just with your feet, and do it so well. It's pretty incredible.
It is. It's just phenomenal. I mean, and I'm going to move on a little bit now, but obviously, you finished high school, education is over. You've had a kind of whole different musical education from just going out and playing and learning the craft on the job, I guess. So
yeah. In Boston, I when about 1968, I started playing in the Combat Zone, it was called back then, which then became the Theater District. But I remember playing 7 nights a week, 6 40-minute sets a night with a 20-minute break in between, and matinees on Saturday and Sunday afternoon for about $165 a week.
Wow, that's cool.
I know, but it was an education, that's for sure.
And you must be in the shape of your life at that point, because
boy, I'll tell you what though, about the first week I thought I was going to die. My drum stool felt like it kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. But it was great music.
Were you a particularly hard hitter at that point, Rick, or were you was it all about the technique?
No, I never really became a real hard hitter. And I even to this day, I was a little more into finesse, maybe from the whole Joe Morello thing. But honestly, when I got into the studio thing, every engineer is going, turn that stick around, hit with the butt end, just hit it in the, hit as hard as you can, hit that, And so I finally switched to match grip, and that really helped a lot.
Yeah.
But it was like a whole new learning process too. I played less, but less is always more in recording. So in a way it helped me,
So, yeah, I guess you'd never played tradition. Sorry, you'd never played match grip until this point.
No, about 19, I think it was a Stephen Bishop record where I just went, you know what? I'm just going to turn these sticks, or I'm going to play match grip. And it took me quite a while to learn how to do that. When I was in Northern California, I took lessons from Chuck Brown, who I think taught Terry Bozzio and David Garibaldi and a bunch of drummers that were up in Northern California. And he got me to put I was always playing with my toe up on the bass drum, and he got me to put my heel down. And he was really one of the best teachers I ever had. That was probably 1970, 71, 72, around there.
So you were still having lessons, even though you were well out of your education age, if you like.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, especially when I went for a lesson with Chuck, just to see what he was, because I knew all these other drummers were taking from him. And I remember my first lesson, he said, well, let's just see what you can do. So we just started playing doubles with one hand, da-da. And he says, okay, let's speed up. And we're speeding up. I get to a point where, I'm done. I can't go any faster. I said, where do you go from here? And he sort of went, and I just went, oh my God, and I didn't go back to see him for about 4 months. I just went, how could I ever do that? And then I realized, well, if he's willing to teach me this technique, which was a whole new technique for me. So I had to sort of deprogram and reprogram at that point. But it helped me play longer, because he just said, if you're always lifting your leg up to play the bass drum with your toe, you're going to get problems in your hip, because your leg is like almost a quarter of your body weight. And I said, well, how do I get any power with my heel down? And he literally kicked the bass drum across the floor. And I said, okay, I got it. I'm going to learn this.
Oh, incredible.
So,
it's quite a commitment, isn't it? As you said, to reprogram at that stage of your career.
I did a lot of practicing. And, I was lucky enough to have enough work at the time. And so the transition, sometimes I would play one way or another way, depending on the song or whatever. But it was, it did take me a couple of years to actually get proficient with match grip.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to Simon Phillips in an interview a few weeks ago, and I asked him about when he went from playing in a right-handed manner to open-handed, and it was the same thing. And he said, I had a ride cymbal on my right-hand side in case on sessions and gigs for a long time, just in case something didn't feel right.
He seems totally ambidextrous now. He's an amazing drummer. I love watching.
An equal commitment to what you've kind of done.
Yes. Yeah, you have to be willing to do that if you want to get any better. That's why I just kept taking lessons whenever I could from someone who had something to teach me, because I knew my own limitations. I was able to accept that, but try and learn something new whenever I could.
Yeah. So obviously your studio career, as well as the live stuff, it's just I don't write questions. I just write sort of facts down, and the names I have in front of me, it just goes on and on and on, and I've probably got hardly any of them, to the ones you've actually done. Yeah. How did your studio career start, Rick?
Well, actually, when I was at Berkeley in Boston, I went to an audition for a 10-piece blues band with horns and everything. And at that audition was Andy Pratt, and he was playing bass, and a guy named Jim Thompson was playing guitar. Well, the 10-piece blues band went nowhere, but the three of us got together. And Andy was part of the Pratt family with Pratt Institute, and they were sort of old money, old Massachusetts money. And we started playing together. And then he put a studio together with an 8-track, and we got a deal on Polydor. At that point, it was basically just Andy and I, and he would play piano, and we'd do piano drums, and then he'd do all the overdubs. So we did a record on, I think it was called Records of Life. And then he got a deal a little bit later with it was Columbia, with a song that became sort of a regional hit called "Avenging Annie."
Yeah.
And it was really it was almost 6 minutes long, which was, you know, unheard of back then. But people really loved it. In fact, Roger Daltrey did a remake of it.
Oh, really?
On one of his records.
Wow.
But he kind of missed the intro. He sort of played it on the downbeats, and it was really on the offbeats. But
right.
It was great that he, you know, that he covered it.
It's quite a
So
compliment.
Andy, yeah, but Andy was already sort of. Andy had some money at that point in his life, and he didn't want to go on the road. And I just really wanted to go out and play live. I mean, I loved being in the studio recording, but I wanted that other side of it. So after a while, it appeared that he didn't really want to do any live gigging. So I moved to Northern California from Boston.
Yeah.
And within 6 months, I was playing with Van Morrison. So I thought that was a good thing.
That was my next question. How did the Van Morrison connection come? Because you've played on some great songs with Van Morrison.
He's a
Jackie
genius.
Wilson said, you know.
Yeah. Well, I know that was a great song. Well, the way that happened was when I moved from Boston to Northern California. I had been playing with a band out of New York City called Rig on Capitol Records, and they all moved out to the West Coast. And Mark Spector, who was their manager at the time, said, who was part of the Bill Graham thing.
Yeah.
He just said, "You got to come out here. You got to come out." He got me a gig for $75 a week with a band on Warner Brothers called Lamb. It was Barbara Moritz and Lamb. And in that band was a great keyboard player and bass player. The keyboard player was Tom Salisbury, and Dave Hayes was the bass player, who ended up working with Van longer than any musician ever has. Yeah. I think he still works with them sometimes. Wow. But one day, Tom Salisbury, and I used to listen to Astro Weeks with Andy Pratt in his library, and I just thought, God, this guy must be so amazing. I mean, his lyrics, his spiritual. So Tom Salisbury says to me one day at a rehearsal with Lamb, he said, "You know, Van Morrison's looking for a drummer." I went, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, I have his number." So I called this number, and Van picks up the phone. I mean, that never happened today. And he said, and I said, "Oh, I heard you're looking for a drummer." And I could barely understand anything he was saying from his Irish accent. But it turned out he said I got his address, and I went up there with my drums and set up in his studio. And he already had a guitar player was Ronnie Montrose, and the bass player was Bill Church. So we start rehearsing, but Van comes in his little studio, and he lies down on his couch, right, with a microphone, and he goes, "Oh, you know, Into the Mystic," and I'm one of my favorite songs. And he goes, 3, 4, you know, it's doom, ba-doom, and we start playing it. Well, we get about 8 bars in, and he goes, "Okay, do you know?" And I'm like, "We didn't even get to the chorus," and he calls off his songs, and we get literally sometimes to the chorus, and he stops, and the whole rehearsal was like that. He never got off the couch, just lying there singing. And
beautiful.
Finally, after 2 days of that, or 3 days of that, I'm going like, "This is killing me. I can't do this. I don't want to do this," you know. And both Bill and Ronnie, we're just looking at each other going, "What's going on?" Finally, the third day, I'm thinking, if this happens again, I'm just leaving. And it starts the same way. About halfway through the rehearsal, Van goes, "Hey, do you guys know Hound Dog?" And we went, "Elvis Presley." "Yeah, Elvis Presley." He goes, "Yeah, we know." He goes, "He ain't nothing but a..." And he jumps off the couch, starts singing this song, and he's like on his knees, rolling around on the floor singing. And I mean, it was incredible. It was like this incredible performance, just the four of us. And it was like he just reached out and grabbed me. I just went, this is Van Morrison, right? And that was the start of it.
Wow.
And then we just, we started learning songs and went in and did that Tupelo Honey record.
Great album. Terrific.
I think I did 6 songs and 4 of them might have been first takes. He hated doing he would never do more than 2 takes, really.
Yeah. He liked that natural kind of.
Always. And the vocal you hear is the vocal that his scratch vocal. I mean, he would never think of going back and, recutting a vocal or anything, which was, I've worked with so few artists that could do that. I mean, it's just amazing.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And how, I mean, I've spoken to a few drummers he's had a lot of drummers over the years, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And you hear such varying sort of comments about the way he is. I think he's perhaps got worse as he's got older. Did you?
The word curmudgeon sometimes comes up, but
Yeah.
He's still. I mean, I have to give him his due. I mean, he taught me dynamics.
Yeah.
He just talk about a genius at dynamics and how to work a band and an audience and bring it way down. And I mean, we never were loud. I mean, when we were loud, it sounded really loud because we played softly a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And would you? I mean, there's a question I had in mind, and that is, who had the biggest influence on your drumming that was a non-drummer? Would you say that would be perhaps Van Morrison then?
Definitely.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, he did. And Edgar Winter's White Trash, I was like the first drummer in the White Trash band.
Yeah.
And that was like an amazing R&B horn section, and just we learned the whole one side of entrance. It's like a whole suite, and we never played it live, but Edgar was another genius who taught me a lot. I was the wrong drummer for that band. When I left that band, that's basically when I left for Northern California too.
Yeah.
Actually, I got fired from that band, and rightly so. I've been fired by some of the best people in the business. I mean,
well, hey, but you played for them in the first place.
Yeah.
Look, there's so many things I've got written down here. We'd be here for weeks if we talked about all of them. So there's some of the songs that you've played on. I'd like to just talk about those, if that's all right with you, Rick.
No, please.
One that's probably high up on your list of credits is 9 to 5, Dolly Parton. It's such a great song, and it's been covered by, I mean, I don't know what it's like. I know you're in Mexico, but in the US, I'm sure it's the same. Every band covers that, regardless of male vocals or female vocals.
Yeah.
It's a huge song. Can you take us back to that recording, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it was an interesting day because I got a call in the morning from, I think it was Frank DeCaro, the contractor. Excuse me. Could I be at a session that afternoon? Well, I was an only dad at that point. I was raising my son by myself. So I had a list of sitters, that I could call. And I called a bunch of people. I couldn't find anybody. So I brought him to the studio with me. He was 8 years old at that time.
Yeah.
And Dolly just fell in love with him, had photos taken with him, sent him letters from the road and cards and everything. Wow. But anyway, that session was so easy with her. She's such a wonderful person. And it was fun, and it didn't take very long, and we were out of there. And that was the only song I played on that record.
Yeah.
But it was a big hit. Yeah.
It's just so delicate what you play. It's just, did you just come up with that, or were you given instruction for that, Rick?
No, not really. Abraham Laboriel was playing bass on it, who is just incredible. And so, I mean, working with it, actually Abraham had played on the Columbia record for Andy Pratt, because I had met Abraham at Berkeley. So I knew him from Boston, and then we both moved out to the West Coast. And so that made me comfortable too. Just, I knew him, and everybody that played on that record was so professional and great that it just made it so easy. That was the wonderful thing about back then about record dates, was you could almost always count on musicians who really knew what they, could read well, had great feel. You didn't really have to give them a lot of direction, although I like direction. I mean, it kind of makes your life easier.
Sure.
So,
and you know, now when you hear it on, if you can, are you immune to it now when you hear it? Just go, oh, it's 9 to 5, or do you think that's me on that? do you ever have that thing?
That, yeah. I mean, sometimes the funny thing about playing on a lot of records, not that song, but there have been times I've heard a song where I went, hey, I think I played on that, and I didn't. And then there would be a song that I had played, and I go, oh, I wonder who played on that. So, and then credit-wise, you know, I did, what was it called? A Night on the Town, Rod Stewart.
Do you know, I was looking at the personnel listing on that. It's incredible.
Yeah, but they didn't list who played on what song. Yeah. So I played on Tonight's the Night.
Yeah.
And I think The Killing of Georgie, and then some ballad.
Yeah.
But because I was an only dad, Rod asked me to play in his band, and I turned him down. And I think I was maybe one of the only drummers ever, but I had no choice. I had Etta James ask me to go on the road. I had Hall & Oates ask me but I didn't go on the road until my son was older. You know,
that's incredible.
Yeah, being a musician with his family is not easy.
No, but you know, the other drummers on that, I mean, the company you were keeping, Al Jackson, for example, Andy Newmark,
yes,
Roger Hawkins, lineups don't get any better than that. What great company to keep.
Yeah, I was, like I say, sometimes being in the right place at the right time. It's not always about practicing. It's about expending some energy to go out and meet people and try and, you know,
sure.
Because you can sit in a room and become a really great player, but you may not fit into certain, you know, personality wise. You have to be able to fit in too. And I was pretty lucky with that, I think. I wasn't a pain in the ass. I tried to really listen and do my best.
Oh dear me! And there's a stunning track, and Steve Barney and I had a conversation about this earlier on, and of course it's the Dionne Warwick track you played on. Is it Deja Vu? And it's such a killer song. Can you tell us?
Another first take.
Was it really?
Yeah, and in fact, I told Steve this story because I saw him put that song up.
Yeah.
What happened was Barry Manilow was producing, and we were in the studio, and he'd hand out charts and sit at the piano, and we'd stand there around the piano, and while he's playing, he'd give us direction. I'd like it to, you know, come down a little bit here, like a little stronger here, and so that particular song he gave, the chart was almost like a 3x5 card. I mean, it was bigger than that, but it had all of the lyrics, all of the melody.
Yeah.
But it was in this little chart, like this big, you know. So we did it, you know, we all sat down, we started playing it. And I took my eyes off the chart for just a split second. And I looked back and I had no idea where I was. But I just kept playing. I was feeling good. I just kept playing. And at the end of it, Barry goes, okay, next. And I went, Barry, I was lost the entire time I was playing that song. Could we do another take? He goes, no, I really like that one.
And that was that. And
that was how that happened. So I'm glad I didn't stop. You can't stop anyway, you know.
No.
Oh, geez, I'm lost, you know.
But of course, you had the great Will Lee accompanying you on bass on that track as well.
I think I was probably just listening to him going, God, this guy can play.
Had you worked with Will before that session?
No.
Wow.
No.
I mean, legendary bass players, you've got it there, haven't you?
He was more, you know, the New York City thing, and I was, you know, LA. But I got to go to New York City to do some recording occasionally, but I just didn't want to go through the winter anymore. I'd had enough of the East Coast, so that's why I chose LA.
Oh dear! I mean, people watching this who've perhaps not heard your name, and they'll certainly know it now. There's a couple more songs I'd like to talk about. An Endless Love, you know, at the time that was enormous. It's still a big song.
Yeah. I met a lot of people who said, we got married to that song.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge. How did
Yeah.
that one come about? Sorry to, I'm just talking about studio stuff, but it's there. It's the legacy, isn't it? It's there forever.
I know. Well, that was another interesting. I'd never working with Lionel Richie was a real treat. I loved him as a producer. He made me do something on some of his songs that I'd never ever done before, which luckily I had played with someone like Van, and I wasn't a basher because I couldn't have played that song. But he said, I want you to play as softly as you possibly can, which as a drummer, you know, sometimes there's this little line between you feel like you're placing beats or you're playing beats. Yeah. And I was barely touching my bass drum, literally. And I kept thinking, how is this going to sound? You know, I've never done this before. This is really strange. And I remember going back in the control room and listening to it, and it was almost a bigger sound in some strange way. It had a lot of air to it that I think normally it would have never had. So that taught me something too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Working with Lionel.
The result is there for everyone to see, you know. And at that time, the biggest stars in the world, weren't they? Up there with them, you know, both of them.
Exactly.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. And we cut that song 3 times in 3 different keys. Really? Because he didn't know the female vocalist that was going to sing the song with him at that time.
Wow, really?
So I think he had three female singers in mind, and they all had different keys they would do it in. Isn't that interesting?
That's incredible. Yeah. Oh, this is fascinating. Well, look, I'd like to talk about one more album, and again, keeping great company with this one. And this is Flash Harry Nilsson from. I haven't written the. Is it late 70s, 80 maybe?
I think it was 78 maybe, or something like that. Yeah.
And again, keeping great company with the drummers there. I believe Ringo, who I know was he and Harry Nilsson were friends.
Totally, yeah.
And Jim Keltner.
Yes. So, I couldn't figure out why isn't Jim here? Why am I here? You know. But I'll tell you why, because he ended up doing it. They were doing it at Cherokee Studios, and the Robs, D. Rob and Bruce Rob and Joe Rob, were all really I had done some work for them when I first moved to LA, and they were the ones that got me the gig with Rod, because Rod was recording at the studio, and they called me one day and said, why don't you come in, Rod? You know, Rod's here and they're looking for a drummer. Yeah. But as for the whole Harry thing, that was my 33rd birthday, I think, or something like that. And I was sitting at home, and D. Rob called me up and goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just sitting here." He goes, "How would you like to do a session with Ringo Starr, double drums?" So I'm going like, "What? Are you kidding?" You know? So we went in and at first we had our drums facing each other in the studio, like maybe 15 feet apart.
Yeah.
Ringo's, did a lot of work there. So I went out and got a drum sound, maybe took 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Ringo went out and started hitting his drums, and all of the heads on that kit at that point were black and all caved in. Okay, so he starts hitting the drums, and one time's like sympathetically ringing the next, and we're all in the control room, and the engineer's going, I don't know if I can get these drums to sing. So nobody wanted to say anything, so we got the second engineer to hit the talk back, and he says to Ringo, he says, "Ringo, we're thinking maybe getting some new heads for those drums. What kind of heads do you like?" And Ringo said this, he goes, "These are the fucking drums I used on Sgt. Pepper. If they're good enough for Sgt. Pepper, they're good enough for this." And everybody just went, okay. And they made him sound good.
Oh, beautiful.
I'll never forget that. That was hilarious.
Oh, that's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. I had such a wonderful time back then. I have no idea how drummers are going to do it today, you know, but I was definitely at that point, it was like a pinnacle, you know, just in studio musicians being able to go into all these studios and record all this fabulous music with these great artists.
I've been reading some of the names, you know, of fellow musicians I was talking about. For example, the bass players on the Rod Stewart album. I've got Duck Dunn, David Hood, and Lee Sklar. Three of the finest bass players you'll ever. I mean, David Hood is my favorite out of them, I have to say. But that's, you know.
Well, Lee, I played with Lee quite a bit in the studio, and then he got me a gig with James Taylor in '82, and I ended up going out on the road a little bit then because I could. My son was 12, and I was able to leave for a little while. I get my sister to come out and take care of him. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Bob Glaub and Bob was the bass player on Tonight's the Night.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Bob was like, you know, you want to put on a perfectly fitted glove. That's the way it felt playing with him, because we did all the Nicolette Larson stuff together, and you know, it was a lot. That was a lot of fun too. Ted Templeman, another wonderful producer.
Absolutely. I've recently read Ted's biography, and it's incredible.
I did too.
Yeah. Great read, really is.
Yeah.
So look, we're hopefully at the end of a worldwide pandemic at the moment. And are you keeping busy? Are you playing much or doing anything much at the moment?
Well, I have this little studio behind me, and excuse me, I'm trying to learn some software called SAW, SAW. Okay. So I have wonderful mics and everything. I just want to be able to start recording again. Sure. Here, there's really not a whole lot to do. The venues really aren't that great. So I still practice. I still sit down and play quite a bit. I did do some gigs here in a little town called San Miguel de Allende. But you know, it's just like the States. If you go out and play in a club, you make $100. Well, here you make maybe 60.
Right. Okay.
So it just got to a point where I went, you know, I think I'd rather just stay at home, practice, keep my chops up, learn some new software, and see if I either have friends or anybody else who wants to send me a song, and I'll put drums on it.
That's incredible. That's lovely. Perfect. Well, look, Rick, this has been, I don't know how long we've been talking, 40 minutes. And it's been a joyful 40 minutes for me.
Quick 40 minutes.
Do you know what an absolute treat?
For me too.
I can't wait for this to go out. I really can't. And I mean that.
Thank you.
I think people are going to thoroughly enjoy it. And I can't thank you enough for your time. You've been so kind. And once again, thanks to my mutual friend, the lovely Steve Barney, for...
Absolutely. Well, let's do it again. We could cover some more stuff someday.
Yes. Do you know what? That would be incredible. There's plenty more to cover.
Yes, I'd love to do it.
Oh, fabulous.
Well, stay safe and healthy. And
thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.